Back in February, I took a vacation to Detroit, Michigan, on purpose. Hello, Vinyl community. Anybody else that might be watching, my name's Tom. My channel is called Rant District. I want to talk a little bit about a visit I took to Detroit back in February. It was a vacation. Me and my girlfriend went, and we wanted to suss out the city to a small degree. We live in Portland, Oregon now, which is a fairly expensive place to live. And as I get older and, at the point where we're retired and income becomes, more fixed, I want to make sure we're in a place that's a lower cost of living and hopefully one that's not constantly escalating. And, Portland, Oregon is kind of like going towards San Francisco the way it's escalating sharply. Anyway, we're looking for a place that, in probably like a 4-year time frame, we kind of figured that's when we'd like to make a move. But we'd like to be someplace less expensive and an enjoyable place to live. Detroit is a place we had considered but nearly crossed off the list before visiting. Milwaukee, Wisconsin seems interesting. The homes there seem very affordable, although the crime is very high, and I think that might be a little bit out of control. Another place we'd like to visit is Chattanooga, Tennessee. There's a lot going for it. No income tax. It's very limited. There's a very limited tax on, I don't know, capital gains or something. But house prices seem very affordable. It's got gigabit high-speed internet. It's got some affordable minor league sports that I kind of like, and it's got proximity to to a lot, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, a lot of places that I haven't spent a lot of time with or any time in my life. So there's a lot of places we want to check out and kind of make a decision in a couple of years. But anyway, so we went to Detroit. Detroit's got issues. We knew that going in, and for about a year, we've both been kind of poking around on the internet, looking at Detroit and trying to figure out if it's a feasible place to live in at some point. For us, clearly it's a feasible place to live. House prices are very inexpensive. They've got there's a lot of issues with Detroit and with Michigan. Michigan is and this is going to kind of tick a lot of boxes. I'm just going off the top of my head, but when you think about the cost to live, besides the price of a home, you're looking at property tax. Property tax is very expensive. I've seen looking at $50,000 houses in Detroit that will have 4,000, nearly 10%, a 10% rate of property tax, which is absurd. And so a higher priced house, the property tax is going to be kind of scary. And what do you get for your taxes? That's kind of a question in Detroit right now. Detroit's a place where you pretty much need to have a car. Auto insurance compared to Oregon is very high. My auto insurance would go up by about 4 times as I looked it up. Michigan is a no-fault insurance state for auto insurance, meaning if you get into a car collision, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. Your insurer will pay. So it's very, if you're a careful driver, that's not a kind of insurance you want to have. Income tax in general is high in that state. Detroit is very high crime. But one thing going for it is that it's got a lot of new construction coming up and reconstruction of buildings. A downside to Detroit, particularly downtown Detroit, is that it's almost all owned by one guy. He's doing a ton, props to him, he's doing a ton of rebuilding in downtown Detroit. Dan Gilbert, I believe, is his name. He's the CEO of Intuit, or whatever that, or Quicken Loans, whatever that company is, whatever the parent company is. But things are kind of weird, We were chatting with somebody downtown who was telling us about how this guy has his own private security force. So a lot of times it's sort of like private police that respond to things, and he monitors, him, meaning, his companies, monitors social media. And apparently, if you see something particular on social media, the local security will try to, you know, say hello to you and have a conversation. You're on camera a lot of times in downtown Detroit. I didn't feel unsafe in downtown Detroit. The only other time I had visited Detroit was in 1994. I went to see a couple of World Cup matches. The only time the World Cup was in the United States ever. Went to see the United States play Switzerland, and then I went to see Brazil play Sweden. And if you ever get a chance to see Brazil play Sweden, all the women that happen to be at a game like that, gorgeous and pretty much exclusively in bikini tops. Just saying. So the World Cup was a blast. Now, technically, those games were in Pontiac, in the old Pontiac Silverdome, which is no more, I don't think. And those were the first ever World Cup matches played indoors. They had brought in and put grass indoors there. But I remember stopping back in 1994 on the east side of Detroit, and it was terrifying. So anyway, we checked out Detroit, drove all over the place. I enjoyed, both me and my girlfriend had a great time there. Enjoyed it. It was interesting driving around, like seeing the far east side of Detroit and all the ruins, and driving north on the main road. I forget what it's called, but as you hit 8 Mile, just as you get, it's after Midtown, you go north, and it's burnt out buildings, graffiti, graffiti, graffiti. You pass 8 Mile and hit the suburbs, and it's so white all of a sudden. The first thing you see is White Castle. It's kind of hilarious, but the suburbs are nice. But the city has to matter. And the biggest thing, I keep on saying this, but another thing going against Detroit is it's really awful school systems. Teachers recently went on strike again over the conditions that they're working in. There are buildings that are just freezing cold in winter, scorching hot in warmer weather. Detroit public schools has a lot of problems. So although right now there's a trend of younger folks moving to Detroit, which is healthy, the trend though is that as people get you hook up, you get married, or you don't get married, you have kids. As soon as those kids are ready for school, the trend is you move out of Detroit and into the surrounding suburbs where there's a better school, because the schools are just that bad. And I don't think that's I don't know how overcomable that is. Also, you've got generations of criminal activity in Detroit, and once something becomes generational, that's hard to overcome. In Portland, Oregon, here the weather is pretty temperate. It's pretty moderate, I should say. And so we have a massive homeless issue here. A lot of people do come here to be homeless if they can, because it's comfortable and people are generally okay with folks being homeless and camping in tents and in the city and whatnot. In Detroit, the weather it's really pretty awful during the winter. Not awful to me. Snow is snow. It melts. Or you shovel it or whatever. But people are used to squatting in Detroit, and it's generational. Kids are used to moving from house to house and squatting and doing the best you can. And again, that's generational, and I think it's become so ingrained. I don't know if that mentality can be overcome. And there's a part of me that would have a fear of, if I was living in Detroit proper, you go away for a vacation and you come back and, the house has been stripped. The people who scrap metal's a big deal in Detroit. The people who buy it don't seem to ask questions. So a lot of wiring pipes get torn out of things. Furnaces, boilers, things get taken out of abandoned homes to sell for scrap metal. So it's got a lot of problems. I enjoyed it. It's realistically not, and I love the sports there. There's so many sports downtown. Went to the Detroit Red Wings game. Went to the Joe Louis Arena. This was the last season that the Detroit Red Wings were playing there. I'm pretty sure, yeah. it was cool. And I always wonder like who goes to all those sports games in downtown Detroit. And when you leave the arena and you see the stream of cars going back to Windsor, going to the bridge back to Canada, I'm guessing that's where most of the fans are coming from, either that or the suburbs. But you got a lot of sports in Detroit. You got the Detroit Tigers, the Lions, Pistons. Although I'm not sure, the Pistons don't play downtown. They might play in a suburb. I'm not big into basketball, so I'm not sure where. Detroit City FC is a fourth division, as it were, soccer team in the United States, but it's very, very popular, very, very interesting to me. They are renovating a stadium in Hamtramck. Hamtramck is an interesting part of Detroit, though it's not Detroit technically. It's I forgot what it's called, but it's Detroit, or Hamtramck is its own city, but it's completely surrounded by Detroit. There might be a little part that touches Highland Park. Highland Park, I think, is another place that's completely within Detroit, but it's its own little city, which is kind of weird. Hamtramck was a neat little place. We drove around there for a while and checked out the stadium, the high school stadium where Detroit City FC is playing this season. That was very cool. There's a lot cool about Detroit City FC, and that's a big draw to me. Story for another day. So Hamtramck is it's interesting though because it's a highly Muslim city. There's a lot of folks of Muslim denomination, what have you, are into city politics there. So you've got a lot of rules about like how close can a bar or a place that sells alcohol, how close can it be to a mosque? And you see speakers on the poles, so on the utility poles. So I'm pretty sure there's a public call to prayer on a daily basis, and I wonder how that affects the time of day that Detroit City FC might be playing or other aspects of it. I'm not a religious person, and I don't want to live someplace that's controlled by a religion, and whether that's a really awful religion like the Catholics, or the Muslims or anybody, So Tennessee will be kind of interesting. So anyway, let's talk about some music. I went to Third Man Records. Third Man Records has a store that they recently opened in the Cass corridor of Detroit. It's Jack White, the lead singer of the White Stripes and the founder of Third Man Records, to my knowledge, has always been in Nashville. But now that Detroit's kind of on the way back, he moved from Detroit to Nashville, I think, made his name, or I take that back. The White Stripes did start out playing in Detroit, but anyway, Third Man Records opened up their second location, which is now in Detroit in the Cass corridor. I didn't know anything about the store, so I went to take a look at it. It's kind of it's on a main strip. On a main strip, it's actually half a block away from the main strip, where Wayne State University is in Midtown Detroit. It seems to me like it's a good location. The thing that I wasn't really prepared for mentally was that because Third Man Records is a record label and that's a store, everything that's in that store is really just Third Man Records, and it seems like more of a novelty shop than a record store. Yes, they have records, but only Third Man Records, which is odd because like Jackpot Records is a record label here in Portland, and you go into the Jackpot Record store and it's everything. Of course, I'll have the Jackpot releases. So that's why I was like a little bit surprised at Third Man Records. So anyway, popped into Third Man Records. It's a lot of T-shirts, a lot of onesies for babies and kitschy stuff. But they do have some records, and I'm like, all right. So I'm here. Let me find something. So I picked up what's it called, Dodge and Burn, I think, by The Dead Weather, Jack White's band. I never really listened to him. I'd heard a song or two. Alison Mosshart, I think, is the lead singer. I didn't even realize there would be a female lead singer in She's not the lead singer for every song, but I like most of them. And I like her voice. I like this album quite a bit. Let's look at the back cover. There was an interesting song on here where Jack White does most of the singing. I think he's the drummer on this album. And the name of the song is the fourth song on the first side. It's called $3 Hat. And the character they talk about is Jackie Lee. And I tried to look up a few reviews about the song, about the album, and nobody seems to reference it. But it's talking about Jackie Lee getting shot, I think, over a $3 hat. And this is going to be where things start getting tied together. Jack White is a big fan of older music. You know, where did music come from? And his label reissues a lot of very old music that was on 78 RPM for the most part. And I find that interesting. But so Jackie Lee, I'm listening to Jackie Lee getting shot over a $3 hat, and I'm reading some of the reviews about the album, and nobody seems to reference that. To me, it jumps out that this has to be about, you know, the character. You know, it was like in the late 1800s. That other bands have sung about, like, but they call them like Staggerly or Stackerly, something along those lines. And the connection to me, it seems really staggeringly obvious, but none of the reviews touch on it. Now, most music reviews these days are done by some 20-year-old listening to a download who doesn't know shit about shit, so I guess that's not that surprising. But this is a really good record. I enjoyed it, and I'll probably check out a little bit more of the Dead Weather. Now, I also picked up two other records. This is Volume 1. It's Blind Willie McTell, the complete recorded works in chronological order from 1927 to 1929. It's old blues, you know, original blues, not the, you know, the kind of blues that you're used to, like, you know, I lost my wife, I'm feeling oh so sad. I lost my wife, I'm feeling oh so sad. I lost my wife, but now I'm feeling glad. You know, a lot of the blues is just very formulaic to me, but this is, you know, where it's coming from, where blues is coming from, and not formulaic. So it's interesting. Now these are from being compiled, I believe, by Document Records. Mentions Document Records down there. So and these are mostly songs that you've heard on a 78 RPM record, or that's where they've come from. So the quality is not going to be pristine. It's cleaned up a lot. So this is not really going to be for everybody, but if you enjoy the history of music, where things have come from, I think there's value in listening to this, and I find this enjoyable. And I also picked up, this is Volume 1, and then, so that's Blind Willie McTell, and then I also picked up similar Volume 1 of Charlie Patton, also early blues. His voice is a bit higher. It's actually a little bit more challenging listen, but I do find it interesting, and I do enjoy it. So I'm gonna dig into these more. There's these are Volume 1s that I have. There's 4 volumes each, 4 records each of Blind Willie McTell, Charlie Patton, and also Mississippi Sheiks, which I didn't grab. I didn't notice. Now, I didn't know anything about Blind Willie McTell or Charlie Patton when I picked up these records. The interesting thing about, and this is funny how things get interrelated, is that you know, during the flight out and the flight back, I was reading this book, Do Not Sell at Any Price by Amanda Petrusich, The Wild Obsessive Hunt for the World's Rarest 78 RPM Records. And I think it was during the flight back, which was kind of a long flight, you know, because I think I had to fly. Where did I fly? We flew to from Detroit to D.C. and then back to Portland. So, you know, we had some time on the flight, so I'm just reading. And then, you know, it talks about Charlie Patton and Blind Willie McTell in here. So I picked up those records not having any idea about them, and then they're referenced in here and they're talked about. It's really, this book, first of all, back up for a second. I had this book on my Amazon want list just because that's where I stash things, in case I might be interested, if I'm not sure I'm interested. And then Dave, who's a vinyl community member, his channel is called the Vinyl Kaleidoscope. He talked about this book shortly before we went on our trip, and said he read it in a day. It was so engrossing, and so I said, all right, it's on my wish list, on my want list. Let me order it. I ordered it, had it for the trip, something to read on the flights, and it was fantastic. This is a really interesting book. So it's after reading the book, there's a collector named Joe Boussard, I believe his name is. Let's see. Joe Boussard, yeah. And there's a lot of collectors in this book that get referenced about their love of the music and their obsessive collecting and how they've unearthed a lot of music over the years. And how hard it is to start a collection like the ones that are referenced in here if you were starting today. Because there's so many of those records are now so expensive, so hard to find, particularly in the condition that they're in, that these gentlemen and ladies have the records. So after reading the book, I picked up a DVD called Desperate Man Blues. This is a documentary from 2006, I think, about Joe Boussard. It says, in the spirit of Buena Vista Social Club, this award-winning documentary is a story of underdog Joe Boussard and his lifelong mission to rescue Americans' roots music from oblivion. He is a man to be treasured. Now, in the book, Joe Boussard is talked about, and he seems kind of like an ornery guy. And here, he may be a little bit different, a little different in general, but the clips where he's playing music or talking about the 78s and the music that he loves, the joy on his face is indescribable. I mean, it's worth watching just for that. It's a really fantastic documentary. I tried finding it to watch. I couldn't find it on YouTube or Amazon Prime or Netflix or anything. I could only find it on DVD, so I bought the DVD. I think it was about $20, a little pricey, but I really wanted to see this, and I'm glad I got it. So it's kind of funny how things are, just all interconnected. I went to Detroit, didn't expect to check out Charlie Patton or Blind Willie McTell. Picked it up, and then in the middle of reading the book, found out, hey, those guys are referenced, and it was a really fantastic book. Thanks again, Dave, the Vinyl Kaleidoscope. And then it led me to this movie about Joe Boussard, the 78 RPM collector. All very interesting stuff. It looks like the time is getting away from me here. Sorry for babbling so much. Check out some of the older music. Check out some of these document records artists if you're interested. And it's kind of interesting to see how what you're listening to may be related and how it may influence what you're listening to now. Or if you don't care, don't. But I enjoy this sort of thing. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.